Hey, I'm Aubriana, and this is a conversation series with builders, leaders, and people shaping and studying the work of change across media, technology, and AI. We talk about what's really happening beyond the headlines, what's real, what's messy, and how people are thinking about transformation that actually makes a difference. Welcome to Agents of Change, Human in the Loop. Hey everybody, I am joined today by Bob Walczak, CEO of MadConnect. And Bob has spent decades building inside of ad tech. He's not just launching products, but he's working through the real, often messy realities of infrastructure, integration, and scale. So his work's really sitting at this intersection of connectivity and AI and helping companies fix foundational gaps that tend to get overlooked early on and are becoming very real problems in our industry. So I'm excited to dig into this from Bob the Builder's perspective here, and what he's seeing from the inside and what he's learned along the way. So Bob, welcome, and thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. Excited about the conversation.
Awesome. All right, well, to start us off, how would you describe your role in the ecosystem today? And tell us a little bit about what led you into this focus on connectivity and why is it a problem worth solving?
Yeah, look, I think we started the business under a different brand of MadTech, and that was a professional services consulting business where we helped companies with their product strategy, management, and development. And we still have that business, and it's still very helpful to working with our clients and enabling their data capabilities. However, we don't do any professional services work that does not include the platform today. What led us to building the platform was really around some of the engagements we were working on clients with around systems integration, where they would have a stack of technology that needed to be connected and essentially configured and set up, and no platform stands alone, right? So as we were starting to do that, there was also the evolution of third-party cookies going away or not, and platforms needed to connect via API to be able to communicate with each other. And so we were building more and more APIs, and also some of my past experience, I was the GM of BidSwitch, which is essentially a one-to-many connection point for the programmatic industry. Making it easier to be able to connect DSPs and SSPs. That architecture resonated with me and was part of the thought pattern around how MadConnect was came to be today. What our platform does is builds all the API connections across the ecosystem to allow for a no-code capability of doing platform-to-platform connectivity. So we started by thinking about all the API connections and how all the systems would work there, and for things like audience activation, measurement, reporting, conversion tracking, and we've pre-built those. And so a client can leverage our system and be able to send audiences same day from sign up, and pull back reporting, optimize against conversions. All that stuff works off the shelf. And then we started to think about this evolution with AI. And I think some of the natural ideas were, okay, you're going to use AI to be able to build connectors faster. True, we are doing that today. We went from taking about 3 months to build an API connector to now we've optimized that in our latest 2.0 version. We're at 48 hours. So we can build a new connector start to finish with full automated workflow capabilities in 48 hours now. And that allows us to scale and manage this. Being a startup, we're thinking about how to be the most efficient we can be as a business and not throw human resources at it as much as being able to throw agentic. But then the real unlock was that we started thinking about how agents were going to be able to work in this new reality, where in an agentic environment, agents need to be able to communicate directly with the platforms. They need to be able to communicate with the data. And humans, the way we interact with these platforms is we log in and we go through the user interface, the UI, and we're clicking buttons and pulling reports and using the graphical user interface, if you will, to be able to interact with those systems. Where agents are going to go through APIs, the application programming interface, and they're going to be able to connect directly into the systems that are already built to be able to manage them and perform the same automations and functions that humans do, right? So that was an unlock. That was a thinking. And when Anthropic launched the MCP standard, that's really where it all came together for us. And we built this capability called what we call our intelligent connectivity layer to enable that connections between the agentic environment and all the platforms that are enterprise licenses to run their business today.
Awesome. Let's go into the machine like a little bit more. When people are talking about a modern AI ready stack, what are they often missing today? I mean, you have this unique perspective, right? But what are they missing that only becomes obvious perhaps once they're already actually inside building them?
Well, I think that each company that manages these platforms is managing them their own individual system, right? And they're thinking about how that system works in isolation with its data set and with its functionality. The reality is that humans log into 7 to 20 different platforms in a day, everything from their Slack and email to their ad server and CDP and systems that they run their business on. And so from that perspective, if agents are really going to take place and interoperate with the systems that the humans are interacting with, that's a workflow issue. That's an operational issue. And, from our perspective, or at least our view on this, is that it all should be connected together. It's essentially work across a common switchboard, if you will, right? So everything is plugged into a single switchboard and then can communicate, all the platforms can communicate across them to be able to perform their functions or jobs.
Yeah. So would you say like there's a common foundational mistake that companies are making early on when they're building data or AI infrastructure? Is there like, I see this 5 times out of 10. I see this 7 times out of 10. Like, is there something that, I don't know, is causing the most pain 12 to 24 months later?
Well, I actually think what we're seeing with most of the clients we work with is that they've built their stack of technology and systems over decades in some cases, right? There's some of the legacy companies out there that have spent years building them, or they're all riding on multiple infrastructures.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen clients that have AWS and GCP and Snowflake and Databricks. They're working with all of the different clouds and hyperscalers. And they're like, why doesn't it all work? And they're like, oh, my data's a mess, right? And so there's a lot of initiatives around data readiness and data, getting your data in order and unified in a way that it can all work together. And I think that's, we call it platform to platform communication, right? I think when you're building a system from the ground up, you have to think about the data schemas that are going to be connected and working together. So there has to be some kind of a common language that allows for everything to work and interoperate. You think in our industry, we hear a lot about an identity spine, right? So everything's working off a common identity set. You're mapping everything to a unique, a single user profile. Those are the types of, that unification work is really where the gaps are, right? Our understanding is, and it was another validating point to build the platform was, the average enterprise is licensing 80 to 120 different platforms to build out their MarTech and AdTech stack. There's a communication issue there, right? And what is essentially, filling that gap today is a human logging into those different systems and having the internal knowledge of how each system works and how to pull it together and collate that data and information to be able to make sense of it, to perform an action or an outcome. For agents to do that, it's going to be much easier if you're working off a common schema and data set that works across those systems to plug into. Our view is that's the ICL, but and I also think it's not something that people think of. It's like, hey, we're going to build this really innovative agent to perform this singular task. Fine. But then you've got another issue that you've just created that agent's got to talk to this other agent, and that one's got to talk to the other agent, and they've got to communicate on a common language. And we're seeing the industry try to figure out that language, right? So to that point, you've got AdCP, you've got the IAB working on their protocol. you've got, a bunch of them coming out, frankly, and, as we do, adding more fragmentation here, but those standards are critically important. They're all important. I think they're solving for different things, but, there's, some are approaching like, how do you handle like programmatic optimization and management? Some are approaching the orchestration and operational workflows. But how that all connects is really, really important. It's difficult. And we're trying to solve that at the, API and MCP level to create a single layer that is scalable, self-healing, and just frankly works. So you don't have to think about the connectivity. You can start innovating on top of that, and your systems will work together to be able to deliver results.
Yeah. So it sounds like obviously unification, enrichment around data is super imperative to making things function properly, because right now you have a lot of signal, but you also have a lot of noise. And until you can determine which is which, the agents are not going to function to the benefit of the company, right? And I think to that point, there is a lot of rumblings and noise in the industry around all of these new protocols, right? So we're hearing MCP has kind of become a common theme, but now we're hearing more about AdCP, the evolution of APIs as AI agents become like these first-class actors in the stack. So from a builder's perspective, I would love to hear how you're seeing these standards evolve and what are companies getting wrong about that? I hear a spectrum of reports, especially when you think about AdCP, right? You've got, I think some people are like, oh, it's just a marketing ploy, or it is necessary. It's foundational to the future of our industry. Like where do you see things going in those areas?
I think it's a step in the right direction. In regards to AdCP, I think all the standards that are coming out are making a step in the right direction. I do think it is a mistake not to learn from what has already been done, and to start from scratch. You can't go and disregard all the systems that are currently in place and say we're gonna build over again. That is, in my opinion, the wrong mindset for this. I do think that by leveraging the systems that are in place, you're leveraging the governance and the protocols and the capabilities that are already working, and then figuring out how to add automations on top of that, how to enhance that, how to increase performance and scalability of those systems. Allow a user to do their job better at scale across these systems. I also think it de-risks things from a business perspective. If you have an agent that has read all the documentation, understands all the functionality of the system, and you tell it to do something, it innately knows how to do that. And I think that is a huge value that you're going to see, with this. And I think that those standards, from my standpoint, the standards is really about creating a language of communication. It's saying like, look, one system speaking French, one's German, one's Japanese, one's English, like how do we untangle that again, create a common language for communication, and then, use that as a way to be able to move forward and achieve outcomes. And once everything's speaking this common language, then it's a lot easier to navigate and communicate, right? And I think we're getting to that, that to me is the direction of the standards. Let's say, I don't have an issue with, any one of the standards that are being put out right now. In our view, we're a neutral system. We have to be able to work with all standards and anywhere the direction the market heads. But, I do think, it will be a mistake if these standards kind of disregard what's already been learned and try to just start from scratch. I think that it'll go too slowly that way. Part of me thinks that we should take all the documentation, all the standards, all guidelines and everything that's been built from all these platforms and all these standards organizations, put that into a massive knowledge base that is open source to the industry and allows everyone to feed off of that and use that as the dictionary for the industry, or knowledge base for the industry, to be able to then allow for that common communication. Mm-hmm. And I think to an extent, certain organizations are doing that. And I think to an extent, AdCP is not coming out of nowhere with this. I mean, Brian O'Kelly, kind of led the charge there, but the group that's behind it, and we're a part of that, we think is, some of the smartest heads in the industry. So they're gonna, it's gonna be sculpted in a way that understands, history and is looking towards a, more scalable future.
All right, jumping in. I like it. Okay, I'll give you like opportunity to plug MadConnect here. So you come into an organization, right? There's been discovery that there's cracks in the system that need to be repaired so that they can move forward and keep up with the times. So how does MadConnect really help the company, the organization that you're coming into, course correct when they realize there's these cracks that are there foundationally, they're not ready? Especially as AI agents start interacting across multiple systems at once. Can you give us like kind of a 3-step process, or, what's the way that you just go in there and start making things foundationally mature for them in a quick way?
Yeah. So look, I think one component of this is that, is what problem are you trying to solve is the first question you have to ask, right? And so when a client brings you in, they're going to either bring you in on the professional services side or, with the platform side of the business. On both sides of that, for us, we look at how, what problem they're trying to solve and how do we deliver the best results on a timeline and a budget that, meets their needs and allows them to win. We've had a lot of conversations more recently around this data unification effort, transformation work around consolidating infrastructures and unifying infrastructure for companies. But then an output has really been, connectivity between, different businesses and organizations throughout the industry. So I'll give you a good example is we've been working with some media companies to be able to connect them to agencies. We call this, we've coined this as Agency Connect as a way to be able to do, connect, take the data, unify it, create that common schema, and then connect it to the agencies to be able to allow for that bi-directional conversation. So you have the buyer agent at the agency communicating with the seller agent at the media provider, likely through an A-to-A protocol or agent-to-agent protocol. And that allows for them to do planning. So look at inventory avails, be able to create an insertion order, send back reporting, optimize or send do audience files, uploads, and then optimize against that. We think that connectivity between buyer and seller is critical. This is not to play on ad CP in any way, but it's to say that like the pipes underpinning it. It's not just the communication of the agents, but then it's when you're going to have to transfer data files. You're going to have to anonymize certain things and send it via hash and have that, you're going to have the governance in place. Like the media providers may or may not want to add, be able to provide just pricing. They may well say, here's our inventory avails, but, from a governance standpoint, we don't want to put the pricing out there, or we may only put our rate card pricing out there, but then we want to be able to negotiate, at scale, a deal that would be more beneficial to both parties, longer commits, other things to that. But this allows this is the start of that communication between media provider and buyer. And then, being able to, the negotiation will be an output of it, saying, okay, we figured out what we want. We want to proceed here. Let's pick up the phone and actually have a conversation. And it allows for more human interaction, right? It's instead of back and forth and spreadsheets and analysts working to try to figure out how to turn something around in 48 or 72 hours, all that stuff's administratively is turned around in real time. Yeah. And then you're having a negotiation about the results so you can transact faster, deliver a better outcome faster for the clients and benefit of everybody involved.
Love that. All right, I'm going to transition just a little bit. I want to step outside maybe your CEO role for a moment. You and I have lived through multiple AI moments, although we could argue this is the biggest one, right? It feels different this time. What is exciting you most about where we're headed, not just in this industry, but I would say with AI in general, and technology in general, and what's giving you pause? I know, beyond a CEO, you're a husband, a father, you've got a lot of other things. So there's a unique lens that you bring, and I'd love to hear what you're thinking.
Wow, that's a lot in that question. I think that, from a business perspective, everything's moving so quickly, and I think there's this frantic nature that is happening across the ecosystem, and everyone's trying to. It somewhat feels like they don't know how to keep up and they're far behind. And I think you're even seeing it from the CEOs of the major hyperscalers and LLMs in the market that, they're kind of still not sure how to keep up with some of the innovations that have happened within AI. I think the good news is that, from my standpoint, is everyone is at that stage and as everyone's learning together. And I think you should, take a deep breath and understand that and be comfortable with it, kind of settle into that, if you will. I think from a personal perspective, and even I guess personally and business is the the governance of this is really important. We deal with every client we're talking to right now, whether it's for the platform or professional services, there's a big question around governance. How do you put the right controls in place to ensure that you don't have data leakage, you don't have an agent go rogue and spend $10 million on a campaign that should have been 5,000. There's it is a frightening world when you kind of turn over control. I mean, I think we're all innately at some level control freaks, right? And so now we have this agentic these agents that are going to start doing all our jobs for us. Scary, yes, because we have job elimination concerns. But then on the other side of it is you can't really afford not to lean in right now. You have to kind of get comfortable with it. And it's really hard depending, what generation you are, how comfortable you are with this. I think, our kids are all just, unabashedly going after this and just, hey, we're going to, just playing with it and having fun and asking questions. And you hear, there's a lot of concerns that it's giving them the wrong information and, it's very dangerous in that regard. So how do we put these guardrails in place? How do we, put some governance around it? There's the personal aspect and individual use, and then there's the corporate and enterprise aspect of it, which is incredibly important. And they come together on this conversation, right? It's, the technology is powering what we do from an enterprise and business to business perspective. It is also powering what our kids are doing with these platforms and these systems and, how they're interacting with advertising and media. And it all plays together. We're actually at a really interesting intersection from an industry standpoint with that. And that is probably the number one thing that, excites me and concerns me all at the same time is those guardrails and governance.
So on the last show, I had Joanna Gerber of Ad Exchanger, and I asked her to leave a question for the next guest here. So the question that she left for you, Bob, is she didn't know who it was going to be. So let me preface that. But she asked, what's one question that people should be asking themselves as they build, study, or shape change right now, including who's helped, who's hurt, maybe how harm could be reduced by it? So what's one question that more people should be asking themselves as they build, shape, study this change happening?
I think you have to think about how things are going to impact the user at scale. From a product perspective, constantly we ask this question, right? Which is we can make, it's actually, they did the demo of the, for AdCP, they were showing like, oh, we sent an insertion order, like great, but that was one, right? We're talking about hundreds of days, thousands, at scale. What's going to be missed in that at scale? What can be screwed up about that? What can happen if, you're not watching every detail at scale? Unfortunately, I'm pointing right back to the guardrails and governance aspect that I just answered, but I think that is a really critical component of the build right now. And I think it's not just, governance and guardrails on a single transaction, it's that at scale. It's, and this is a question that comes up with our platform a lot, which is to say that, okay, we're connecting one system or, and that works great there. But like, if every company just said, okay, we're going to build our agents on top of our individual platforms, and one company is going to do it in their own way and write their own, context for their MCP servers to be able to have it function their own way, and another platform is going to do it their own way. you'll still have a communication gap there. And they'll have different governance rules and different systems, and there won't be like an overlying layer that really protects against those things working together. And that's a critical challenge at scale to solve for, that I think is, needs to be addressed when building anything. Is to think about, what can go wrong at scale, not at the one transaction when you're prototyping, but when you're doing billions of transactions or trillions in our industry, right?
Yep. Yeah, truth and reality can become very relative very quickly in that world. All right, so the premise of this, conversation series is about being agents of change. Obviously, we're talking about changes in AI and tech, but I also want to ask, what does it mean to be an agent of change to you right now? More in practice than theory, but as somebody who's building infrastructure others depend on, what does that mean to you?
I my entire life I've wanted to build my own product and run my own company. That's since I was a kid. I talked to my dad. That was just who I am, right? And this is a moment where the things we do are going to have massive impact. And I couldn't be more excited about being in the middle of it. I'm not on the sidelines. I'm not, watching others do it. We're in the middle of doing this as an industry, as a company. And I'm truly excited about the moment, terrified by the, some of the realities that are coming at us really quickly, that we have to make decisions that are going to have impacts later. But it's it's a fun moment and interesting time to be a part of. I think it is probably the most revolutionary thing that's happened in humanity. And we're all a part of it. So it's exciting from my standpoint where we are, but I wouldn't want it any other way, I guess, at this moment.
Awesome. What question would you like to leave for the next guest, another builder, leader, shaping change from the inside?
I think I would love to understand that person's point of view as to this exact time a year from now, Feb 10th of 2027. What will be the 2 to 3 biggest changes that have occurred this year in their minds looking ahead? We all know something's coming, AGI, super AGI, like how is that going to have an impact in exactly 12 months from this moment?
All right, Bob. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate your openness and the builder perspective that you brought to this conversation. You lit up, when you started to talk about why you do this and your purpose. So thanks to everyone who is listening or watching. And if this episode sparked a new way of thinking or helped you see the system a little more clearly, feel free to pass this along to someone else who's building or navigating change. And you can follow Agents of Change Human in the Loop wherever you're getting your podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, a quick subscribe or share genuinely helps thoughtful conversations like this reach the right people. So until next time, keep building with intention and keep being an agent of change.